T346 Technology Element. The table below shows the execution sequence of transactions X and Y on tables T1 and T2. The tables T1 and T2 are shared resources, and steps 1 through 8 in the table below shows the execution sequence of processes. Each table is locked just before the table is updated and unlocked once the transaction is done. In the following table, which of the following is the point at which deadlock occurs? Here is the table in question. With the time axis running downwards, we have transaction X and transaction Y. Firstly, the transactions are started, tables are updated, and the transaction is finished. The question is, at which point does deadlock occur? Is it at step 4, 5, 6, or 7? First of all, what does deadlock mean? Deadlock means when multiple transactions attempt to lock a shared resource, they mutually wait for the release of the resource locked by the other party, and they just end up waiting perpetually. Key points in this question are resources locked just before update and resources unlocked after transaction is complete. When the transactions start, transaction X and Y locks table T1 and T2 respectively and performs the update process 3 and 4. Prior to process 5, transaction X attempts to lock table T2. However, T2 is already locked by transaction Y, and transaction X gets into waiting mode. At this stage, it may seem that deadlock has occurred, but as X is in waiting mode, deadlock has not occurred yet. Next, prior to process 6, transaction Y attempts to lock table 1. As before, table T1 is already locked by transaction X, and transaction Y gets into waiting mode. At this stage, both transactions are mutually waiting for each other to release the lock, and deadlock occurs. The figure on the next slide shows the whole process. Again, with the time axis running downwards, we have transaction X and transaction Y. Firstly, transaction X starts and table T1 is locked. For transaction Y, table T2 is locked, and when transaction X updates table T1, table T2 is locked and transaction Y updates table T2. At this point, table T2 is locked and it goes into waiting mode. And the next thing that happens is transaction Y goes into waiting mode. And with both waiting for the other to finish, this becomes a mutually locked situation and it is known as a deadlock. Therefore, C is the correct answer. The systems go into deadlock when they are both mutually waiting for each other to finish.